Welcome to my Accent is No Accident podcast. I am your host, Maritza, and we are here today with a fantastic lady. Her name is Carlee Myers. She is the stress management pro that you want, an expert in relationship enhancement.
As the founder of the Stressless Company, Carlee Myers is an expert at helping leaders manage day to day stress in a way that creates satisfying results such as improved sleep, increased income, fulfilling personal relationships, and more. She is the creator of Holding Space, a trade market company, a new container that allows people to come together, share, and be deeply witnessed in a safe, judgment free space. Carlee, a diplomate of the American Institute of Stress and certified Safe Conversations facilitator and workshop leader, has had her work most recently featured in media outlets such as Parade, Fox 29, Good Day Philadelphia, the Maui News, and Holy Magazine.
So, Carlee, welcome. It is an honor to have you on my podcast today.
Hmm.
And I am very, very thrilled for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to see where it takes us.
Yes, definitely. So let me ask you the first question that is the theme of my podcast. Carlee, what is your accent and why is not an accident?
Hmm. Yeah, well, my background really, gosh, it goes back quite to my accent. Where have I come from? What has gotten me to where I am today? It all goes back to an experience that I had when I was about 12 years old. And I do want to give your listeners just a bit of a trigger warning before sharing. But when I was about 12 years old, a man was actually murdered in my home, and my mom was shot 3 times. And my mom had actually, during this time, was had broken up with an old boyfriend, and that boyfriend had broken into my childhood home, killed her new boyfriend, and tried to kill her. And while my mom ended up basically making a miraculous and almost full recovery, I ended up struggling for a long time. I ended up struggling with the symptoms of PTSD, with stress, with jumpiness, with overwhelm. I mean, you name it, I was probably struggling with it. And, so for so many years, I ended up, I didn't really tell anybody what was going on. I kind of kept it to myself. I thought maybe I would be the straw that broke the camel's back. There was a lot going on in my family. There was a lot going on in the world, really. And so it took me a long time to really open up and to share with those closest to me about what was going on. And what was interesting about that experience is that when I finally opened up and shared that, hey, I'm feeling a little stressed, I'm kind of struggling right now, which was an understatement. It People's responses really showed me something. The people that were there who held space, who were open, there was no judgment. Those people helped me heal. They were right there by my side helping me heal tenfold. And then on the flip side, there were the people that, good intentions. They had good intentions, but it didn't land quite right. And so, those were the people that gave unsolicited advice. Right? Hey, have you tried going to therapy, going to yoga, trying meditation? These are all really wonderful things. And yet I had already tried them. And so getting that advice was like a slap in the face. Like, come on, do you think I've been living under a rock, right? Um, and then there were the people that related to their own experiences, right? Where it was hard. It was a really difficult time. And so, I tried for more than 10 years to kind of figure out what worked for me in terms of managing my stress. And I finally, after 10 years of exploration, finally figured out the many for me. Oftentimes we think there's like one main solution. And the reality is that it takes quite a few things to get us to that beautiful state of mind. And when I finally found that light at the end of the tunnel, a little bit more peace. Admittedly, I then also I had relief on one end. On the other end, I was angry because why wasn't anybody talking about this? Why wasn't anybody talking about the fact that there's no one size fits all when it comes to stress management? Why wasn't anybody talking about conversations and how they deeply impact our ability to heal? Why wasn't anybody talking about all of this? And so I threw a temper tantrum, I'm not gonna lie, threw a little bit of a temper tantrum, and then it hit me, and I realized, wait a second, I'm supposed to be the one that's talking about this. And so I ended up creating the Stress Less method, which is my 5-step signature system that helps people figure out what uniquely works for them to manage their energy, to figure out the ways that they're sabotaging themselves, creating unnecessary stress on top of what's already there, how to remove it, how to remove those blocks, how to get to that beautiful state of mind. And I also got certified in something called Safe Conversations because I know personally from my own many life experiences that conversations deeply impact our ability to heal through whatever it is that we're going through.
Thank you for sharing this story. What an impactful story. Is not something that, although it happens every day to many people around the world, it's not something that we hear on our lives every day. And I am grateful that you went through different ways to heal yourself.
Thank
And
you.
I would like today, from your story, take the opportunity to share with our audience what is the PTSD and how can we help with those traumas
Yeah.
to different people.
Yeah.
Because I do resonate with you. Are there really tools for this? Are we really paying attention? When somebody tells that they have PTSD, are we the jerk that is asking, what, did you go to war?
Oh my gosh, yeah. You
It's
still
like,
have a bit of a visceral reaction from, there's so many. Yes. Well, so to start off with your first question, PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. And, from my perspective, the way that I see PTSD, and I think it's worth saying that I'm not a licensed therapist. However, I am a coach with plenty of research under my belt and almost a decade of experience at this point. The way that I see PTSD is something happens to us, and it is our reaction to that something happening. So one situation for one person could be totally fine. It would not create PTSD. But for another person, it creates a stress reaction in their in their mind, in their emotional experience, but also perhaps in their body. The definition of stress, and this is kind of related to how I'm perceiving PTSD, is stress is sort of like an equation. It is the thing plus the perception of the thing that creates the stress. So a great example of this is my dad and I actually, and our perceptions of kayaking on a river. So for me, I grew up in a rural Maryland, and in Maryland, where I grew up, there's lots of dams where the water is being blocked up. And so growing up, I always heard stories of people not being aware of where the dams were, and they would go over and they would be severely injured or even die. So I heard these stories all the time. Rivers aren't safe. There's dams you could go over, you could get hurt. And so I ended up developing a bit of a fear of like, you don't know where the dams are. You could, at any time, something could happen. You could drown, like it's dangerous. And so I've always had more of a hesitancy about I actually love, but I've had more of a hesitancy. I'm like, we need to research the route really thoroughly. We need to be really careful. So it's the thing, and my perception of the thing is that it could be very dangerous. So that leads to stress. I had this conversation with my father years ago about being nervous about going kayaking and talking to him about how we need to thoroughly plan the route and this, that, and this. He's like, what do you mean? He's like, no matter what, if you kayak against the current of the river, you will never find yourself at the top of a dam. You will only find yourself at the bottom. So if you the current of the river, you will only find yourself at the bottom of a dam and then you float yourself back home. There's no possibility. And so this was a like blew my mind. In terms of, the same sport, the same hobby. His perspective was like, what do you mean? You just go this way, you come this way, you'll be fine. The thing plus the perception of the thing equals the stress. For me, I had stress. For him, it wasn't a big deal. So that's kind of, what I'm thinking about when I think about PTSD, although it's, on a much more life impacting scale. Yeah, you're right. With PTSD, oftentimes we hear it's about veterans, it's about going to war. And that experience is 100% valid. And there are so many people, including myself, who've struggled with PTSD, who've gone through, whose traumas are not war, right? Whose traumas are domestic violence, whose traumas are sexual assault, whose traumas are related to just to I don't want to say the word just, but to, interpersonal relationships, emotional neglect, emotional abuse, right? There's so many, and I'm not even touching, this is the tip of the iceberg of things that can create PTSD. And so, yeah, that is one of the things that pulls me back a little bit because I'm like, where is the resources for the rest of us? But yeah, it can range. It can be a veteran, it could be a civilian, it could be many experiences can bring on this stress response.
And that's one of the things that I always tell. I do have PTSD as well, but then one of the things that borderlines is, yes, when you go to war or a veteran, that is like a stream, but there are other extremes. If there are people with PTSD that grew up homeless,
Mm.
and their PTSD of not being able to eat, not being able to have a place where to sleep that night, etc. Also, where they come from. If somebody, for instance, I come from South America, and in South America, there are places in Colombia, there are places where the terrorists took over towns, and they saw dead people all the time. So it's like a silent war, but they got used to see people being killed all the time. So that creates a PTSD. Although the person might seem natural and normal, there will be things that trigger them, sounds, behaviors from other people.
Yeah.
Now, with this comment, I want to jump into something that is very important. How can, how does affect people in PTSD, and specifically any trauma affects people going to work, being the new person, feeling that they have to go through something that triggers them. How does somebody with PTSD feel at the workplace?
Mm. Well, again, I'm not a licensed therapist, so I want to really drive that point home. But I can say that, someone who's experienced trauma, or even just this extreme stress, it shows up for everyone very differently. But I can say that for sure that there's been studies that show stress specifically impacts every area of our lives, every area of our bodies, even, right? So, for instance, if we have chronic stress, it can create issues in our reproductive system. So, if we're women, we might experience more intense menstrual cycles, or if we're in menopause, more intense menopause symptoms. If we're men, it can actually lower our sperm count. Across, it can impact our digestive system, so it can lead to issues with our bowels. It can affect our hearts, our cardiovascular system. So stress can lead to heart attacks, strokes, cardiovascular disease. Um, it can lead to other mental health disorders, right? Depression, anxiety, and other symptoms like headaches, insomnia, right? And so there's really not a single part of the body that is not being affected by stress. And so imagine being, my listeners would be to, especially if you're not this person, is to just imagine what it would be like to go to work with all of these symptoms. You're starting off your day. You haven't even gotten your work assignment. You haven't even got the stresses of your day to day. And you are going into work with a migraine. Or you're going into work and you're running to the bathroom, right? Or you're just fatigued, right? And so when we think about going into the workplace with PTSD or just this undue amount of stress, let's say the rest of our coworkers are at one point of the starting line, right, where most people are. We're way back here in the back. We've got a disadvantage because, again, we've got that migraine. We're running to the bathroom. We're fatigued. There's just our minds. Maybe we have racing thoughts, the anxieties. It's putting us at a disadvantage to achieve the same outcomes. And so that's one way I would say, it impacts. So it could show up in a variety of different ways, but at the end of the day, when we're going into the workplace, we are at a bit of a disadvantage to achieving the same outcomes. Because if we were well rested, well fed, our thoughts weren't racing on a different subject, right? We're set up for much more success in the workplace.
And then one of the let's say, and obviously somebody with like a therapist, a psychiatrist, or psychologist will have better tips or kind of FDA approved tips.
Yes, FDA approved. Exactly. Yeah, and not food. This isn't food, but yes, more
Yes, but coming from somebody that has PTSD and helps others um, relieve that stress. One of the things is when you have PTSD and you are a high achiever, it actually funny thing, most of people with PTSD are high achievers because they're trying to hide those other feelings through their work or their achievements or goals in life. Not everybody can accomplish these goals that they set for themselves, but sometimes they're higher than they can accomplish. So when you go to work and you have, let's say, an abrasive or a little aggressive boss, and depending on what the triggers are, but if this person triggers the PTSD employee, the person with PTSD, or the person with the trauma, or that is going through a lot of stress. Maybe they don't even have PTSD yet, but they probably are on an abusive relationship or something at home is going on. And if they are triggered, my question is, do we really have the help at work? Do we really have the tools that will say, wait a minute, this person is not feeling well, we need something for them, or are we just sending them home? What do you think of that?
Yeah. So I don't know the statistics on this, and I'd be really curious to hear. But I think it really depends on the workplace. I know there's so many, wonderful organizations that have wellness initiatives that are providing, let's say, financial support for those who need therapy, reimbursement programs for different wellness initiatives and things like that. Um, and then we have the companies that don't have those benefits. And then we have companies that have those benefits, but the culture is not at all supportive. And then you have the companies that don't have those benefits, cultures are incredibly supportive. And so I think it can be a mixed bag. What I can say is that I know that many people are afraid of sharing, of being transparent, of what they're going through, whether it's a mental health disorder or whether it's just stress. Um, because they're afraid for the impacts of their job, right? And so one of the things that we have to be really conscious of, especially in the workplace, is this power dynamic. And it's not that this power dynamic is necessarily bad. Sometimes we need this power dynamic to accomplish things. There's got to be sometimes there has to be someone who's saying, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, then we're going to do this, kind of get everybody together. But the consequences of a power dynamic is that then someone can be afraid that one, if they share with one person, that they could lose their job. And so we have to be really conscious of how this fear also impacts us. So it could be that the company wants to be supportive, wants to help their employees. But if we're an employee that is afraid to share, then we're not going to get the support from us as well. Or maybe we are an employee that wants to share, but then we know that there's consequences from the company. And so one of the things that I would love to see, shift in the workplace is, answering the question like, okay, how do we navigate these power dynamics so that people feel psychologically safe enough to get the help that they need? And once we're able to get the help that we need, that's when everything improves, right? Because I mentioned, like, if we're going into work with this setback of the symptoms of stress, our productivity, it's going to take us longer. Maybe we're not going to get the outcomes that the company wants. So it's the company's best interest to take care of its employees. The other thing I just wanted to circle back to really quickly is that I saw a statistic, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it did prove kind of what you were sharing, which is about high achieving and PTSD, which is that, like, a ridiculous number is like somewhere between 70 to 90% of entrepreneurs have some sort of mental health disorder. And usually that means some sort of trauma. And one of the interpretations that I read along my journey was that, that we do this, we go into or some level of leadership, because it's sort of a way for us to say, I'm never going to let this happen to me again, right? I'm going to be in control. I'm going to make sure that my life is as safe for me as it could possibly be. Now, the irony of entrepreneurship is that it's probably some of the, the most roller coaster rides of the century, but at least we know we're the ones in the driving
It's
seat.
not as safe.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, in terms of getting to situations that will damage you, but the stress level is high.
Yes.
So really is not there might be triggers to anxiety and depression and feeling unworthy and feeling like you need to hide, depending on what are your symptoms and what are your mental what is the mental state when you're triggered. So one of the things that I think on what you were saying, probably the workplaces have things that and rules and probably policies that will help in the mental health for the employees. But I believe the majority of the places do not train the employees to react to these kind of situations?
Yeah, no. The majority of companies, employees don't know how to handle difficult conversations of any kind. And that's just I think it's because we aren't taught. None of us are taught in the school by our parents, and it's not the school system's fault, and it's not our parents' fault because they weren't taught, right? And so, um, yeah, even if the company has a wellness policy in place, even if they have funds for reimbursement for therapy or coaching services or any other wellness service, if let's say you go to your HR person and you share what's going on, does that HR person actually know, aside from like legally how to respond? Do they know how to provide a psychologically safe response? Does your boss know how to do that? Do you know how to do that for a colleague who's going through something difficult, even if it's just about work? And the reality is that most people don't know. And that's sort of part of my origin story, right? Where my accident is no accident. Like, it's so important. I know how important safe conversations is, or are, because I know what it's like to be in the depths of despair and going to somebody to finally ask for help, which took so much courage. It's terrifying, right? And then not being received, right? And so having our employees, those in organizations trained in a methodology like conversations could be an absolute game changer. And so I guess I should say what Safe Conversations is, because I brought it up quite a few times now.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So Safe Conversations is a whole new way of talking. It was developed by Harville Hendrix and Helen Kelly Hunt. You might be familiar with their work in the romantic relationship sphere. They are world-renowned experts, written plenty of books, and Harville has years of clinical experience. Their work came out of the clinic. They were frustrated that they were only doing it in the therapeutic setting, and decided that they wanted to bring it out to the world. And so they created Safe Conversations, and I studied directly under them. And so Safe Conversations it basically, like I said, it's a whole new way of talking, but it does three things. It teaches us how to talk without criticism. It teaches us how to listen without judgment. And it teaches us how to connect beyond difference. So one of the things that Harville and Helen were trying to answer over their decades studying, the question they were trying to answer was, why do people fight? Simple question. Why fight? And what they found was that people fight because of objection to difference. That's it. Objection to difference is the reason that we often fight. And so they created this methodology that involves a few things, one of which is sentence stems, to help people connect despite difference. Maybe I don't have PTSD, maybe you do. We're different then. So how can we connect despite having vastly different life experiences and current life experiences? Safe Conversations helps navigate that.
That is beautiful. I love that. I didn't know about Safe Conversations until I met you. And the last week I've been stalking you, preparing to this interview, and I am amazed. And I can tell you that being in corporate for so many years, I work in corporate for 20 years. I can tell you right now, workplaces, no matter how big or small the company is, are not prepared. Probably in companies that are family based, you have a little more of freedom and a little more of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
However, you will not find the yelling boss in the family is small company, but the bigger it gets, the more stressful everything is, and then you get the leader that does not know how to communicate. They probably are suffering, like you were saying, they're probably suffering themselves from some sort of trauma that they want to heal, and they learn to communicate in a way that is not safe for the person that is in front of them.
Hi, I'm very happy to know you are here watching our podcast today. It is an honor to be featuring so many entrepreneurs on the journeys of their inside voice, their accent that is not an accident. And we want to reach out more people like you who are creating a better world of diversity, inclusiveness, equity, and belonging. So please take a moment to hit the subscribe button below, like, and share to others. And even if you want to leave a comment, that'll be nice. Thank you for your support. And now back to the episode.
Hmm. Yeah.
So one I saw yesterday on LinkedIn, and it's funny because you know how the universe manifests. I saw a video, and it is a social study where a professor of a university, and it's obviously this is not real, this is made up, but a professor of a university is starting the lecture and is beginning the semester, and there is all the alumni in front of him, and he points at somebody and says, "You, I want you to get up and don't come back ever, ever, ever come back here. I don't want you in my lecture. I don't want to see you again." And the person goes, "Why? Excuse me, I don't understand. I want you to leave. Pick up your things and leave right now." He's very serious. And then the girl is all confused. She picks up her things and leaves, and everybody is silent. The very first question that he says is, what is the law? And then they give different definitions, and one of them says justice. And he said, "Perfect. Was it what I just did to your classmate?" And they say, "No. Why didn't any of you say anything?"
Hmm.
And he explained to them, "You didn't say anything because it did not affect you."
Hmm. Oof.
Exactly. And then how can we get society? That's probably one of the things with safe conversations. If we get society to understand that we can stand up and say, "Excuse me, why are you saying that?" Or, "Wait a minute, not what's happening." It is safe to have
Mhm.
that conversation, and it's safe to stand up for others without having to fight,
Yeah.
without having to be irrational.
Yeah. Yeah. And safe conversations is a beautiful methodology for that. I mean, for a hypothetical story like that, right? But to be able to ensure that everyone's viewpoint is heard and received. This is why, you know, safe conversations as a whole, like safe conversations corporate, I don't know what else to call them.
Yeah.
Harville and Helen, right? They're really trying to get this in partnership with those who are certified like myself into companies, into schools, into organizations, so that, well, one, this is where most of us spend all of our time, right? We spend a lot of our time at school or at work. And so to create safe environments there to hopefully ripple out into our personal lives as well. But to be able to say, safe conversations, what it does is it helps us hold space for another person without bringing our, for lack of a better word, crap into the
Yeah.
conversation. It really is like, it does have one of those simple foundational principles, which is we have one person talk and one person listen. And then when this person who's done talking, the person who's talking is done, we can switch. But it's instead of this back and forth where I'm sort of waiting for the other person to finish so I can say that what I want to say. It's really like, hey, I'm here, I'm really listening, and I'm going to listen until you're complete. and then I can share. We see this all the time, by the way, in like sitcoms and things like that. I'm thinking about like Friends. I can't think of a specific Friends episode, but where like, let's say Joey and Chandler are having a cup of coffee and Chandler's like, I can't believe that girl didn't call me back. And then Joey's like, this coffee is disgusting. And then, then the other one responds, it's like, what did I do? Was it my hair? I'm just making up a story now, but like
Yes.
they're talking and they're, one's talking about coffee, one's talking about a date that didn't go well, and they're going back and forth, but no one's really listening, right? And so we can miss each other in that process. It's fun.
Yes.
It's funnily depicted. We laugh at it when it's in a sitcom, but in real, by the way, if you take the laugh track off of Friends or, actually, I think it was The Big Bang Theory. If you take the laugh track off some of these sitcoms, it's cringy. It's cringy. You're like, wait, that's not funny. That was really mean.
Yes.
But yeah, we see this all the time displayed in our TV.
Yes. And then it one of the ways to show it is being comical, but like you say, if we take the soundtrack off, it becomes real.
Mhm.
So that is one of the things that when somebody is experiencing or going through kind of mental health issues or um, any stress at all, they have a different soundtrack in their head. And it's probably very, very, like let's say tinnitus is very high pitch,
Yeah.
and somebody comes and yells at them. Guess what happens? You contribute to that high pitch to get to a level that is not the person is not able to grasp, that is not able to handle.
Mhm.
That is probably the best way to explain, a high pitched sound, and then somebody comes and creates feedback. You know how you create feedback sometimes with the microphone and everybody goes, oh, it's
Yeah.
exactly that
Yeah.
with mental health. But then the oh is really getting sick, calling for weeks, not being able to work, not being able to talk to people, and it can get to a suicide episode.
Mhm. Yeah.
So creating better relationships is the key, and we create better relationships with safe conversations.
Yeah.
Uh, Talking about trauma and realizing you have it and making sure that you are able to talk, and then leaders need to be more open to understand it and not don't feel pity for the person, but understanding that, hey, if I tell you not to yell at me because it affects me, I don't have to tell you my life story. I already told you if it affects me, don't do it.
Yeah. Well, oh my gosh, there's so much that's coming up for me as you're sharing. Um, One thing I'll say quickly, and then I want to return to a comment on um, being sent over the edge. So the first thing is when we have a frustration, under every frustration is an unfulfilled wish or desire. And so this is sort of a foundation of safe conversation. So we have a frustrations dialogue process in safe conversations. How do we communicate frustrations? So again, under every frustration is an unfulfilled desire or wish. And so like when I'm talking to folks about communicating in the workplace or in their personal relationships, etc., this is one of the first places people like to go. Hey, don't do this, don't do that. You always, you never, right? And notice I'm already automatically pointing my finger, right? There's this outward expression because frustrations, we tend to feel like it's from the other person. And so just a quick tip for your listeners would be to figure out when you're frustrated, what is the unfulfilled desire or wish that you actually have? And so for me, one of the things that I would do when I was really struggling is I would be so frustrated that I was misunderstood, that I felt so misunderstood and isolated, and because I wasn't experiencing what everyone was experiencing, and I wasn't getting the empathy that I needed, belonging that I needed. It's basic human need. And so instead of getting angry and, you never do this, you always do this, right? I started to switch. Now it took me a long time, but I started to switch to, hey, I'm feeling really disconnected from you right now. I'd really love to share what's going on in my life. Would you be open to that? Or, hey, I really want to feel safe right now. Can you help me do that? And so I shared what it was that I wanted and asked, are you willing? And that made a huge difference in the way that I was communicating as someone who has experienced that undue amount of stress and getting my needs met. And then the other thing that I wanted to share was related to the pitch that you had mentioned. That's a really great example. The other way that I describe it is that all of us have a nervous system. So this nervous system regulates our body, our emotions, our just how we show up, really. And the nervous system comprises of two main parts. It's the triggered part, the fight, flight, freeze, or faint, and then we rest and digest part of the nervous system. Now, most people will live, for the most part, in this rest and digest place. And so then when something stressful comes up, well, they'll go up to fight, flight, freeze, or faint, but they'll address it and then they'll rest back down. For someone with something like PTSD, it's hard to get into rest and digest. And so instead of starting down at this baseline of rest and digest, maybe we're starting at a baseline of anxiety. And so then what happens when something happens, right? We can go to panic. We can go to completely shutting down. So it's just ups the scale of where we could go, send us over the edge. And another way that I like to think about it is that our nervous system is like, let's say it's like a 5-lane highway. When we're in rest and digest, when it's not triggered, it's like a 5-lane highway. And so this highway's got cars and tractor trailers and birds flying over and maybe some weather every once in a while. But it's a 5-lane highway. It's moving. It's got room for all of this. But after we experience a traumatic loss or a devastating loss or an incredibly stressful situation or chronic stress, it's happening, little stress, it's happening over and over and over again. What can happen is our nervous system can completely rewire. And so it's kind of another example of saying, instead of starting at rest and digest, we're starting at anxiety. This highway that's supposed to be a 5-lane highway all of a sudden becomes a 2-lane highway. But the problem is we still have the same amount of tractor trailers, the same amount of cars, the same amount of birds, the same amount of inclement weather. And so we get a traffic jam. So we have accidents on this highway. So we end up in overwhelm. We end up with these struggles much quicker because our nervous system was rewired to be much more sensitive. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. And it's very relatable because there are times, because not every single day. Yes, every single day you wake up with, okay, another day in my life. I'm gonna get through this. But you wake up sometimes okay, and then a noise, you walk by somebody that was yelling at somebody else. Somebody said, or somebody sounded like someone that reminded you of that trauma that you lived. And you go to the accidents, the traffic jam, overwhelm, then panic attacks, then depression, then getting sick.
Yeah, exactly.
I believe that the best way we can describe this to help everyone in the workplace and everyone in general in a day to day is realizing that we all don't know, and it's true. It sounds like cliche, but we all don't know what the person in front of us is going through, has lived, you know. So if you don't know, if you are in front of a complete stranger, like the cashier, and the cashier has been doing a crappy job, instead of yelling at them, tell them, you're you're getting through this. You're you're doing it, you're doing the best you can.
Mm.
I hope you have a better day. Instead of, can you please hurry
Yeah.
up? You ring this thing 3 times. What is on with you? You know, you're the
Yeah.
worst cashier I ever had.
Yeah.
Um, you don't know what's going on. Just
Yeah.
be kind.
One of the things that causes the most damage in relationships is negativity. And so negativity is anything that can be perceived as a put down. So it could be the eye roll, it could be the language that you use, it could be the tone of voice, it could be so many things. And so you're speaking to that right now with the cashier example, right? Instead of the eye roll, instead of the direct insult, instead of the tone of voice, that's all that does is create damage. We can choose a different way. Well, one different way is to commit to the zero negativity pledge, which is a big component of conversations, which is to pledge at least for 30 days to do your very darndest to keep negativity out of your relationships, even the distant ones, like grocery store clerk, right? Um, and instead, fill your relationships with those affirmations, those appreciations. Thank you so much for showing up to work today and for being here. I really appreciate you ringing up my groceries because I hate self-checkout. You know, whatever, right? Really sending those appreciations out, because what that does, it begins the healing process. Because to your point, we don't know what's going on in someone's day. Maybe their day is going absolutely horrible, and appreciation could turn their day completely around. Or maybe their day is going great and you just sent them over the edge from great to joy, right?
Exactly. um, I once, this is funny, it's a true story. Was at Publix once, when I used to live in another neighborhood before, and the cashier was kind of like a little grumpy, and I didn't understand what was happening, but this was the place that, I mean, I basically, they were part of my life because I knew absolutely everybody. I
Mm.
knew the schedule and things like that. Oh, today we're gonna have so and so, and I kind of like knew them all because we lived there for like 10 plus years. So this lady is, she used to be a joy, and she was grumpy, and I reached out her hand, and I'm not glorifying myself. I just reached out her hand when she was ringing, and I said, what's happening? Where is, and her name was Jody. And I said, where is the Jody I know?
Mm.
And she's like, I've been fired. And I'm like, you've been fired, you have to work today? I I was I was a little like, wow. Then I didn't know what to say.
Mm.
And I said, well, I'm sorry. And I didn't know what else to say. Now today I say, well, I probably should have said, Jody, you're doing the best you can, and you are doing a magnificent job, and where you're gonna be. Here's my number if you need anything, something. But I didn't. I was like, I'm so sorry, because I felt awkward that
Mm-hmm.
she kind of. So I think that what you're doing, if I would have known, if I would have been with you, or have met you before, I would have been able to say something better at that moment. I was like, I don't know what to say.
Yes. And that's how most of us are, right? A friend's going through a breakup, a divorce, right?
Yeah.
Ooh, I don't know what to say. Like, you want to be there, but you don't know what to say. And so some of us even step back and we're like, we just kind of go away because we don't want to make it worse. And safe conversations, there's actually three pillars, additional pillars of safe conversations of the process that we actually can take ourselves and others through so that we're never in that awkward situation ever again. And so the first component is The second component is validating. And the third component is empathizing. And so let's say in that instance in Publix, where what we would do is we would just say, and this is big picture, but we could say, oh, so what I'm hearing is that you were just fired. Did I get it? Did I hear that? Right? And so she knows that she's been heard. She'll likely say yes. Once we get that confirmation, then we go into validation. Well, that makes sense. It makes sense that I don't see the woman that I normally know today because getting fired is tough. And then we can go into empathizing and we can say, I imagine you are feeling shocked. I imagine you're feeling scared. I imagine you're feeling angry, even. Are those the feelings? And so rather than having this, like, I don't know what to say, we now have a system, a process to be like, let's make sure they feel seen. Let's make sure they feel validated in their experience. And let's make sure that most of all, most of us really want to be seen in how we feel. It's not about the situation, but it's about our internal experience. So to have someone, so to know that someone else really understands our internal experience is enough to create deep healing. So we have a new,
That
yeah,
is beautiful. So basically, the safe conversations is not only for anyone with trauma or anyone with issues, it's for absolutely everybody. And
exactly.
everybody should take it even in corporations. So you have given us an example of how you work, but please tell us how people can find you, how you work with people, corporations, or companies.
Yeah.
All
Yes. So you can find me at thestresslessco.com. That's my general website. And I would love to provide a free gift for your audience. So
awesome.
it is the Safe Conversations free guide to zero negativity. And the link is a little complicated, so I'll ask if you don't mind putting it in the show
I'll
notes
put
for
it in
folks
the
to
show
click.
notes. Yes.
That would be a great place to start if this is interesting to you. Because like I said, negativity is one of the most damaging things in all of our relationships. And so if we have anywhere to start, starting with just doing our best to take negativity out of the situation, and again, put in those words of affirmation, that's a beautiful place to start. But yeah, if you're interested in learning more about working with me or the Stress Less method, you would go to thestresslessco.com. And you can find information to apply for a free relationship assessment with me. You can learn more about the Stress Less method there and all of the wonderful things that I'm up to these days.
Yes, and you can get to read her blogs, which are amazing. And
Oh,
you
thank
also
you.
have you also have a YouTube channel, which I did love all the. It's very authentic, by the way.
Oh,
I
thank
love
you.
I love all your videos and the content. It's very authentic, and
Oh,
it's hard, content, and I love it.
oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So, thank you so much, Carly, for being here. We're getting to the end of our episode. And is there anything that you would like to share and leave the audience with a last thought or something like that?
Yeah, I would just say that if you're going through something and it feels like it is a dark night of the soul, and it feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, that there is another way. There is a way out. I've been there. There's hope. And just a little mantra that I used to use myself is the opposite of depression is hope. The opposite of depression is hope. And so if you're feeling like there's nothing here, right, for you, I would challenge you to find even the tiniest glimmer of hope anywhere in your life. Even if it's, oh my goodness, I'm going to have cinnamon toast crunch for breakfast and I love cinnamon toast crunch, right? Find the hope wherever you can.
Great. Thank you so much. This was beautiful. And I can see us getting in touch again and again. Thank you, everyone, for listening and for being here today. And remember, you came to this world because you are loved, to be loved and to have a better world. Thank you. Have a good day.
Hi, it's Maritza here. If you like this episode of My Accent is No Accident podcast and would like to listen more like this, subscribe wherever you're listening to it or watching it. Leave us a nice review and share with your friends, family, and network. Thanks for listening.